Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Today I thought I'd talk about a little bit of dogma and something a little bit, I think, deeper than, it's I guess less practical in some ways, but it's very important in other ways. And it's kind of the belief of why we believe. And what is faith and what is knowledge of God and what does that even mean? The first dogma of the church is we believe in one God. And we say in the creed, which is, the statement of faith that we read during the services, we believe in one God. And what does that mean? What does the word belief mean? And so, if you just look at the definition, what St. Paul talks about is the evidence of things not seen, right? So, right off the bat, faith has to be something that's not tangible, right? I mean, I can't believe, if someone says, do you believe that this is a church? Well, of course it's a church, right? I mean, I can see it, I can touch it, I can see the people, I can see the chairs. So there's no belief there. Okay, so belief has to be something I can't see. Otherwise, it's just evidence, right? And that's where faith comes in. And our faith is founded on the phrase, I believe. And it's not necessarily founded on rationality, what I can prove, what's logical, right? And there's a jump there that we have to make. At some point, you have to let go of what is tangible, right? And just by the very nature of what we say and who we say God is, you kind of have to, right? Because if I don't, right, if I reach a point where I say, look, if you can prove it to me, then I'll believe in it. And if you can demonstrate it to me logically, then I'll believe in it. Well, then what have you done in essence, right? In essence, you've basically said, I'm here, all right, I'm up here, and God's here. And you need to convince me that God is okay, and that he's real, and that and when I am convinced of God, well then, okay, you've proven it to me. Right? And so, people may not view it that way, but that's basically what you're saying, right? And you're and you're kind of reversing the order, and you're putting yourself in a position to say, I will evaluate it, and when I'm convinced, then I will, right? Versus putting myself in the hands of something that's much bigger than what I could possibly comprehend, right? Because if you think about what we believe and what God is, I mean, it has to be outside the realm of anything anyone can think about, right? I mean, we've all been in an airplane, right? World's a big place. So it's really big, right? And then we start looking at, the Hubble telescope and we realize the world's a really, really big place. And so God is really, really big, I suppose. And then, we say, well, but God's inside the hearts of all the people and he's inside our thoughts. So that makes God what? Very, very small. And so is he big or is he small? And can we even start to possibly comprehend what we're even talking about here? I mean, are we even close? Can you even fathom anything like what I just described? Something that's bigger than the solar system and small enough to fit inside everyone's head? Right. So almost by definition, we're already in a world where, come on in, guys. We're already in a world that's well beyond, we're talking about faith. Faith in Mina. Looking ripped, bro. And so unfortunately what we try to do sometimes is we try to take this big world, this big God, and we try to make him very small. We say, God, he's Coptic Orthodox. And he really likes these hymns. And if you say the hymn right, God's happy. And we're like, okay, So I understand God now. He just wants me to say the long tinthino. And you're like, yeah. And if you can do it in the right tone, then we're all good. Right? Stupid, but that's how humans think, right? We're going to try to take this very large God and we're going to make him into something very small. Okay, so it's not founded on rational grounds or proved to us from our own personal intelligence or found through research or from our outward experience of senses. This is faith through experience. And faith is a revelation to the heart. It's a revelation to the human heart. And it's very, very personal. And it's more powerful and closer to reality than thought, and it is more complex and involved in feelings or emotions. When someone comes to have faith, it's a very personal experience. And it is as real as it gets. And when you talk to someone and you say, tell me about what the faith that's in you and why, they'll kind of have trouble explaining it. And they may give you a story that's like, well, I was walking and I had this thought, and then this happened, and then this happened, and that's how I knew God was speaking to me. And you're like, I don't know, sounds like a wacky story. And they're like, I know, but it's as real as it gets, right? And I like the way this is written. It's more powerful and closer to reality than the thoughts that you have. Right? And to the point where someone says, so that's the story and that's why you have faith in God? Yeah. And would you absolutely hang your head on that? Absolutely. Would you die for that? Absolutely. Someone says, well, why don't you just deny it and live? No, I'd rather not. I mean, that's what the apostles did. That's what the followers of Christ did. That's what millions of people have done when asked to just deny it and say, well, let's just move along and you can keep your life. It's like, can't do that. So it's that strong. It's that powerful. It's that real, right? And it's that intangible. And it's that unprovable, right? It's more than feeling or emotion. It penetrates you completely, right? And you can feel the faith of others, right? And those of you who have been around the holy people or, mission trip or whatever, where the world's on fire, you feel the fire. And it's more real than anything else you've felt, probably in your whole life. St. Maximus the Confessor writes, I'll read it to you. If you are about to enter the realm of theology, do not seek to describe God's inmost nature, for neither the human intellect nor that of any other being under God can experience this. But try to discern. So he tries to tell you right off the bat, don't try to get into God's inmost nature. By definition, it's beyond you, right? If you could get it and if you could comprehend God, then he's not God, right? If something limited and something small and something as small as your brain can comprehend God, then that's not a God you want to believe in, right? So the day you say, I get God, and I always joke around, the people said, let me tell you why God gave us COVID. It's just stupid, right? I mean, you're going to tell me what God's thinking, bro? Like, is that really what you're about to finish that sentence? That's crazy, right? But people do that. So we don't ever want to get to the point where we say, well, I get God. I comprehend God, right? Then he's not God. Then he's an idol. Then we're pagans, right? It's an idol we've created so that I can get my head around something I make up, right? And then I can say, yeah, okay, that's God and I get it. He says, but try to discern as far as possible the qualities that appertain to his nature, qualities of eternity, infinity, indeterminate goodness, wisdom, the power of creating, preserving, and judging creatures, and so on. For he who discovers these qualities, to however small an extent, is a great theologian. So he's saying, don't try to understand, I understand God. Try to understand his characteristics. And from there, you can go much further, right? And he lists some of them: wisdom, goodness, power of creating, infinity, eternity, indeterminate. These are the characteristics that you want to try to get, right? And if you notice, as a theologian, we never really describe what God is. We describe what God isn't, right? A lot of ins there, right? Infinity, indeterminate, right? And timeless, outside of time, outside of space. We can say what God isn't much easier than we can say what he is. Okay, so our faith can't be based on words. So even we have things like, we have documents and books, and we have the creed, and we have things like this where we try to write down what we believe. And we say, we believe in one God, God the Father, the Pantocrator, and so on and so forth that we say in the church. But obviously the faith is much bigger than the words, right? And we can never reduce our faith to the words, right? The creed is a lot like, like the railing on a road, right? So you're driving on the road and there's a railing, right? So you don't go over the edge. And the railing is saying, stay in here because this is the road you want to stay on, right? The railing isn't the road. It's just keeping you on the road. Make sense? So the creed is like that. The creed isn't really what we believe. It's just kind of saying, this is the road. That's the path, okay? But it's your path. It's a personal path, right? And it's one you follow with God, right? Once you say stuff out here, then you're outside the railing, right? Now you're talking about a different God, a wrong God, a God that hasn't been demonstrated to us. It's also something that comes through experience and growth. And in the Gospels, it says it's like a mustard seed. And so we know the story of the Samaritan woman, which was the sinful woman who was by the well. Christ came, he spoke to her for half an hour. He changed her life. And he touched her life. And then she went to another city and she talked about Christ. And then Christ went to that city and they all met him. And then they said something very interesting. They said, we no longer believe because of your word, for we have heard for ourselves and we know that this is truly the Savior of the whole world. So this is the perfect experience, right? She comes in contact with Christ and then she goes and she wants to tell her friends, come and see someone who told me everything I ever did. Okay? And they're like, okay, this guy sounds cool, and that's really neat, and you seem to be really excited about this guy. Fine, we'll meet him. And then they meet him. And then they say the real part, right? We no longer believe because of you. And that's where we all need to get to, right? You're all coming of age, right? You've all had your parents tell you what to think. And you all have to reach a point where you can say, like these people, we no longer believe because of what you say, mom or dad, or abuna, or bishop, or pope, or archdeacon, or whoever, right? We no longer believe because of you. I don't believe because of you. We have heard for ourselves. We know that this is truly the Savior of the world, right? And so each of us has to get to that point in our own personal relationship with God, right? Where it's not the Sunday school teacher anymore. We have seen it for ourselves. It's my faith. It's that personal. And this is why I don't like it when we have a culture of forcing kids and forcing people to do things. That's not the way faith works, right? You can't force someone to have faith. That's impossible, right? You can't force someone to believe in anything. You can't force love. Right? I can't hold a knife to your throat and say, love me. Right? And so this sometimes we have this attitude where we're forcing people to come to church and forcing the kids, and we make them fast, and we make, maybe when they're 10, say you got to go to church, but at some point, and I hope all of you don't make this mistake with your kids, don't force them to do anything. Don't force to do anything, right? After they're 13 or 14, they can make their own decisions. Right? And the decision they'll make isn't based on what you say. It'll be based on what you do, who you are, what you are. Right? That's going to be the determining factor. And Philip told Nathanael to come see Christ. And once he met Christ, he said, truly you are the Son of God. Right? So again, you have the apostles telling people, hey, you got to meet this guy. There's something about him. And then everyone kind of goes, yeah, I know. I've heard there's a lot of guys and they're charismatic and they're kind of interesting and they say some nice things, but then they meet him, and then it's like, okay, I may have believed before because of what you said, and I gave you the benefit of the doubt, and I showed up and I met the guy and we had coffee, right? But now I don't believe because of you. I believe because of me, right? And that's where we need to get to, right? Anything before that is just kind of the preliminary step, right? That's just the mom's making me go to church, the priest said this, the whatever said that, okay? And it's not mine. It's yours. It's my parents. It's my Sunday school teachers. It's the priests. It's not mine. And it has to be yours, completely yours, 1,000% yours. Yours and no one else's, to the point where I don't even want to tell you about it, right? I'm not a big fan of people going, let me tell you what the Lord put in my heart this week. We were talking and God said to me, it's like, huh? Are you're going to tell me about this? I don't even tell you about what my wife and I say. Certainly not going to tell you about what me and God say, right? And so that culture of, let me expose my personal private life to everybody and tell you all about, that's not us, right? That's very personal, right? So my relationship with God stays between me and God, and I don't talk to anyone about it, right? I can talk to you about him, but I don't talk to you about me. You're not interested in me. You don't really care about me. You shouldn't care about me. You shouldn't care about my relationship with God. You shouldn't care about how I pray. You shouldn't care about what I do, because I'm just a guy, right? And my job isn't to tell you about me or to tell you about let me tell you how I worship and what I think. And my job is to point you to him. And then he will teach you. He will take you. He will show you. And I have full faith that he will. In his time, in his way, you will come around. You will meet the people. You will find the opportunities. You'll be put in a position where faith just comes to you, right? And then you have to make a decision. Any questions or comments, thoughts? So faith defies logic and rationale. It contradicts the human mind and sometimes scientific research. It is more powerful than any human force or logic. If I say it smells nice here, you can't give me a piece of paper and say, prove it. I mean, something as simple as it smells nice. I can't prove that to you, can I? Or if you feel like someone likes you, you can't prove that either, right? So I can't even tell you what an orange tastes like, can I? Can I describe to you an orange? In fact, if I eat an orange, you've never had an orange, and then I tell you, let me tell you what an orange tastes like. And I write down, 200 pages about what an orange tastes like. Do you know what an orange tastes like after reading it? No, you don't. You have no idea, right? And so this is the life with God, right? I can live a life with God and I can write 2,000 pages all about it, and you can read all 2,000 pages and you can memorize them, and you still have no idea what I'm talking about. I can't even describe to you what a rose smells like. I can't even describe to you what an orange tastes like. I can write down as many words as you want me to write down, and I'll still be way off. So imagine how much more complex my relationship is with a person. Can I even describe what love is like? Can I write that down? Sure, I can write a novel, but you still don't get it, right? Until you're in that. And this is what we see, right? I mean, when you take stories, all the stories in the gospel, like the 5 loaves, the 2 fish, Peter walking on water, this is faith, right? These are things that happen that are outside any scientific anything, right? You can't explain how a human can step on water and not break the plane of the water. There's no law of physics that lets you get there. There's nothing I can write or prove for that, right? So the laws of physics were created by God, and in that way, he can break the laws of physics when he so chooses, right? And the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, right? I mean, we can all add up how many people can eat that amount of food, and it isn't going to add up to whatever it is, right? It's not, it doesn't contradict science. It's just beyond science. It's bigger than science. It's bigger than what's provable. I was one time in a monastery when I was in college, and here in St. Anthony's, and one of the monks asked me, he said, so what's 3 times 9? And I was like, 27? And he goes, so in the world, 3 times 9 is 27. Out here, it can be anything we want it to be. We aren't constrained by that law here. And I was just like, wow. And he's talking about a realm outside of the laws of physics and logic. And he's talking about God, where God can do all things. Right? And the amount of miracles he's seen with his own eyes proves to him. And he has this faith that's so deep because he's like, it really doesn't matter what the world does. When God wants to act, he will. And there's just nothing you can do to stop it. Okay, so the knowledge of God. Certainly we cannot fully comprehend God in his essence. St. Gregory of Nyssa says, that which is not subject to number cannot be counted. What is invisible cannot be valued. That which is fleshless cannot be weighed. That which is infinite cannot be compared. That which is incomparable cannot be understood as greater or less. Right? So he's just basically saying all the systems we've created as human beings to measure things and to divide the world and to make categories, you can't apply those to God. God can only be comprehended through faith and not through logic. It's not that we can't understand anything about God, but we cannot fully comprehend God. And as I said before, if we do, then we've created an idol. And the example that some of the fathers talk about is say you're walking in the desert, right, and you're dying of thirst, and then you see a spring kind of bubbling up, right? And, sometimes there's these springs that pop up in the desert, underground water or whatever. And you see the spring and you haven't had water in 2 days. What do? Right? You see cold water coming out of the desert. Do you stand there and think to yourself, I wonder where the water's coming from. I wonder if there's an underwater well. Let's have a long discussion and debate about where this water is coming from. Is it a spring? Is it underwater? Some path? Is there a tree nearby that you just throw your face on the spring and you drink? And you drink until you're satisfied, right? And that has to be my reaction to an interaction with God, right? If God presents himself to me, for me to sit there and to think, let me debate this and argue about this and have a discussion with like 30 people and have an argument on Facebook about it, you're kind of missing the point, right? The idea is I need God. And so when he comes to me, I throw my face on the spring and I just start drinking because I'm in need. I'm not going to discuss. Right? And so every time we see these very unfruitful discussions, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and people are going back and forth and they're arguing, and you're like, this is really stupid, right? Because if you're in this situation, you don't do that. So clearly you must not be in that situation. You're in some other situation. I don't know what situation you're in, but you're not in the proper situation, right? You're somehow in a position where I think I can just have debates and discussions, not I need God. I need him in my life. So where does our knowledge of God come from? And there's really 3 sources. The first is the creation, the second, the incarnation, and the third, purity of heart. So the first one is the creation itself, right? So in Romans it says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, right? And so I can learn, there you are, Jacob, right on time. Perfect, every single time. Amarinta. And he works, I know. And I give him a hard time. And he comes from like Guadalajara. And I still give him a hard time. That's love. And so what Romans is saying is once the invisible hand created, well then I can know something about the creator from the creation. Right? And so, it's kind of like, sometimes you'll give a kid, you say, draw something for me. And the kid draws this very dark, angry person stabbing another person, and there's blood, and it says help, and you're like, oh, we have to talk, right? And then someone else draws these beautiful flowers and birds and says, oh, life's so good. And you're like, okay, this is nice, right? So I'm kind of inferring something from what they've done, right? Kind of like when someone says, oh, I know that author. I've read all her books. What does that mean? Do you know the author? Have you met her? No. Have you spoken a word to her? No. Does she know you? No. So how is it that you know the author? Well, I've read all her books. I know how she writes. I know how she thinks. I know how she constructs stories. I know how she constructs statements. I know her grammar. I know her use of words. I know her expressions. I know so much about her. Why? Because I've seen her handiwork. I saw what she created, right? And so from someone's work, I can figure out something about them, right? I mean, when you're in an area, when you're an engineer, engineers look at other engineers' work and they can tell you all about the engineer. Like, oh yeah, I know how this guy builds things. He always does this, and this. That's his style, right? And they can spot each other just by their engineering. Right? So anyway, we learn about God from the creation because he made it. And we can figure things out about God from what he made, just from us. I mean, just a human being, right? I mean, you've all started to dip your toe. You all took biology and chemistry, and some of you are going on a little further than that. And you're starting to realize, holy moly, this human body, it's pretty freaking amazing, right? And when you're in the 9th grade and you take Bio 101, right, you think, oh yeah, I understand the human body, right? Until you get into medical school or you go on further and get a PhD and you realize we don't know anything about the human body. I don't even know, you can talk to a bio teacher in the 9th grade, they can tell you how the eye works, but you can talk to the most eminent, PhD on the eye, and they'll tell you, we have no idea how the eye works, right? Because as you start to study anything, you get to a certain point and you realize we don't know how it works from here, right? And some very basic things. I mean, certainly the way the brain works, not even close to understanding, right? And so from this organism, you realize what made this. Now, obviously, there's the other answer, which is chance. Evolution, boom, 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 things are banging around. Very difficult to believe, right? But by studying the human body, you can understand something about system and organization, and even creating something that fixes itself, that improves itself. I mean, something as simple as, when Mina works out, right? I'm just going to put you on blast, right? When any person works out, right? And they lift a dumbbell, right? And then the body reacts by making itself stronger. That's crazy, right? That you have any machine that will make itself stronger and better in order to take on the load the next time. We're not even close to inventing anything that does anything like that, right? And so Socrates contemplated even the human body. And every philosophers from before Christ, of course, did. He says, because the eyes are sensitive, they have eyelids, like doors which open wide when you want to see and shut during sleep, so that the wind may not harm them. We have, no, it shouldn't be eyelids. Oh, okay. We have eyelids, so that even the sweat of the head doesn't irritate them. We have eyebrows. Oh, it's so that the wind may not harm them. We have eyelashes, so that even the sweat of the head doesn't irritate them. We have eyebrows. The teeth of the animals are pointed in the front to tear the food, and molars in the back to grind it for digestion. We notice that the mouth, where the food comes in, is placed near the eyes and the nose. Are all these things so wisely made the works of chance or of a thinking mind? And this is Socrates talking, right? He's just contemplating the order of humanity. Okay. Lots here, but One of the nice stories that we hear about is the story of St. Anthony. So St. Anthony, as you know, he's a very famous monk. He was the first of the monks. He was illiterate, right? He didn't read Greek. But people would follow him because of his wisdom. And then people would camp out around him. And so people, philosophers and other educated people started hearing about this guy, Anthony, and they'd go to the desert to just talk to him. Who is this guy? And there's this one group of philosophers that went to him and they asked him a bunch of questions and he knew all the answers. And then at some point they said, aren't you illiterate? How did you know all of these answers? And his answer to them was really quite stunning. You know what he said? He says, yeah, I read nature. I learned it all by watching nature. Right? I studied nature and how God made it, and so then I understood God. And that's how I'm answering all your questions. You learned men. Right? And so he figured things out, right? Just by looking at the handiwork of God. Okay, I'll continue on so I don't get too far. But one thing that we even see when Christ was speaking with some people, he said, "Look at the birds of the field and the lilies, birds of the air and the lilies of the field." Do you guys remember this? And what's he basically saying? He's saying, you, human beings, you're supposed to be the crown of the creation, but I want you to learn from the lower creation. I want you to learn from the birds. Look at how the birds act and be like a bird, right? They have the same father you do, the same creator you do, right? And he says, birds, they don't think about harvesting and what they're going to store, and they just fly. And when they're hungry, they look for food and then they eat. Be like a bird, right? So he's actually appealing to everyone to look at the creation. And he says, look at the lilies of the field. Solomon, all his glory wasn't arrayed like one of these, right? And so he's teaching us, that you can learn from my own handiwork. Okay. The second is the incarnation, right? This is in the person of Jesus Christ, right? So here we say that God took flesh, that God manifested himself through a man, that in this man, he showed all of the characteristics, or as much as he could, of a human being. So if I could take all the characteristics of God and I could try to create something that helped me understand what this God was, it would be this person. And all the subtlety in him teach me about who God is, right? And we find that God has a lot of characteristics that we wouldn't have guessed, like humility. That's not a characteristic I would have guessed God had. I would have guessed God's all powerful, he's almighty, he's, all judging, he's whatever. But then Christ comes along and he says, yeah, but I'm also really humble, and I'm soft-spoken, and I don't yell, and I don't hurt others, and I care about everybody, and I love everybody, and I dress like a bum, and I'm born in a manger, and I ride a donkey, and I'm basically a homeless guy, and I'll interact with anybody, right? And so all of a sudden, who I thought God was changed, right? Because Christ came and he shows us, no, I'm very not like that. I'm very loving, and I'm very simple, and I'm very humble, and I'm very good, right? So the incarnation in the person of Christ, it teaches us about God. And he says that, I reflect the Father. If you know me, you know the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And he's giving us this hint, right? Look at me, and I'm just reflecting in a human form all these characteristics of God. And then the last thing is the purity of heart. So this is kind of the practical application and sort of the best source of knowledge of God that we have. More than the creation, more even than the incarnation, the purity of heart. So there's a verse that we read all the time in the 6th hour. We say, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Right? What does that mean? Right? So seeing God is about the heart. So if I want to see God, what do? I have to purify the heart. we were just in Egypt, and in those hieroglyphics, I don't have a picture, and the hieroglyphics, there's one of the judgment of the pharaohs. Anyone ever see this hieroglyphic? How do they judge the pharaoh? First of all, there's the god of the underworld. What does he look like? A dog, right? And then the pharaoh goes down into the after he dies, right? And he goes to judgment. And then, how's he judged? They weigh his heart. And what do they weigh it against? Huh? A feather. And if the pharaoh's heart is lighter than a feather, he gets to go on to the eternal life. But if it's heavier than a feather, then he doesn't. I love that. This is thousands of years before Christ, but the concept is the same, right? The pure heart is the one that's not encumbered by anything. It's not carrying anything. It's not hateful of anybody. It's light. It's light like a feather, right? And so even in the times of the Pharaoh, they knew that the good heart was the light heart, right? The purity of heart that sees God. So the key to seeing God in our lives is by purifying our hearts, by removing those things that hold us back, right? And we all know the things, right? Whether it be anger or greed or passion or control or lust or whatever the passion is, the more we remove those passions, the more we see God inside, right? Because Christ even said that the kingdom of heaven is where? Where is the kingdom of heaven? No one knows. The kingdom of heaven is inside you. Is that right? Anyone hear this one before? The kingdom of heaven is inside us, right? And so, since that's the case, then the whole key to seeing the kingdom of heaven, the whole trick, if you will, is by removing all the things that are not heavenly. And then we start to see, right? It's kind of like, anyone ever see silver after a long time? Like your grandma's tea set that's made out of silver? Anyone ever go to grandma's house and look at her tea set? What does it look like? The silver one. What does it look like? It looks like crap, right? It's covered with junk. Okay, it's called tarnish. Silver tarnishes. Okay? And so all real silver looks really bad. No one's ever been to Tita's house and seen the silver? The old silver set that you don't want to drink out of? Right? And then you go to Tita and you say, this silver set looks disgusting, Tita. It's tarnished. It's gross. And Tita says, but you don't know, it's silver underneath, right? And then she takes one of the tarnish wipe and she wipes the thing, and all of a sudden the thing is beaming and it's silver again and it's bright and shiny, right? And so that's the way we are, right? We're all silver. We're all gold underneath, inside, but then the world starts to tarnish us, right? Layer upon layer of junk gets on us. And then all of a sudden we look at us and we don't see silver anymore. We see junk. And sometimes we make the mistake of calling each other junk. Oh, you know what she's like? She's this, or he's that. And what are they saying? They're saying you're sin. She's just a whatever, he's just a whatever. And no one is their sin. You're silver. You have the kingdom of heaven inside you. Now, on the outside, you can be whatever. You can be a mass murderer, but that's not what you are, right? That's just the tarnish, and that comes right off. Easy. Just by the little tarnish thing, with one wipe, it comes right off. Years of tarnish, right? So purity of heart is how we see God, because where do we see him? In us, because he's inside. So this is why our religious knowledge and what we know about God doesn't come from theologians. It doesn't come from scholars. I mean, someone was just telling me that there's an atheist who teaches their New Testament class. Okay. Right? They're a scholar. They're a New Testament scholar, but they're not going to teach you anything about God. They can teach you about words, and they can teach you how this word was defined in the Greek, and what's the historical context of this passage, and where was this city located, and blah, 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 blah. That's all knowledge. That's all fun and games. It's great if you're interested. But what we know about God doesn't come from those people. We don't learn about God from learned people. We learn about God from holy people, from pure people, right? They're the ones who teach us something. They're the ones who give us insight, right, into how God is. And it's for that reason, right? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Not blessed are those who went to seminary, right? It's not about taking classes and learning a bunch of stuff. That doesn't teach me about God. That just teaches me words. Okay. So when we become pure, we remove the blemish of sin. We see more clearly the image that we were created in. We are in the image of God, and as we get closer to the life of purity, we become closer to the image of Adam before the fall, right? This image that's inside of us, right? And this is how we learn about who God is we see him and feel him inside us. And we understand that he moves with us, right? Even in something like communion, where we say we want to take him inside us, and we want him to be a part of us, and us in him, right? Okay, I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions or comments before you all fall asleep? Any sadness in general? COVID concerns that I can alleviate? I can't. I'm just saying that. I have more slides. You want me to continue or want me to stop? Continue? Stop? You can just go like this, and I'll stop. Sarah, you want me to stop? I mean, you just got here, so you better not say you want me to stop. Okay. You're like 30 seconds in, so like, yeah, I made the drive. I might as well get my money's worth. So in this purity of heart aspect, we read that Adam was given control over all the creations, right? And we read that Adam was given power and dominion over the world, and that he named the animals, and that the animals didn't harm Adam, right? And that's very interesting, because every once in a while, you'll read a story about a saint who lives with a very vicious animal, right? And there's lots of saints. Emma Barsoma used to live with a snake. Ember Ways used to live with a camel. And if you ever met a camel, they're very disgusting animals that don't think very well, right? But this camel, he used to sleep on this camel, and when the blanket would fall off Ember Ways, this camel would lean over with his mouth and pull the blanket and cover up Ember Ways, right? Very unlike a camel, right? And that Saint Pavli, a bird used to bring him half a loaf of bread every day. Now, as you all know, birds don't bring bread. Birds take bread, right? You've all had seagulls take your French fries, right? So that's what birds do, right? They don't bring you anything, okay? So you found that, and there's stories like this all over the place, right? Where the saint reaches a point where he lives with an animal that's a dangerous animal, like when St. Anthony had to bury St. Paul, he didn't know how to bury him, and then all of a sudden 2 lions come out of the wilderness and start digging a grave for St. Paul, right? That's not what lions do. Usually they attack people, right? So when you read these stories, you're like, what's up with this story? Is it just a cool miracle story? Like, oh, wow, look at that. The bird brought him bread. That's neat, right? What is that story? It's actually more than that, isn't it? Right? What it is it's showing you that this person reached the state of Adam before the fall. He became like Adam. He was in that pure state such that nature obeyed him. Right? And we see stories like this, right? When Christ would stand and tell the sea to stop, to not storm. And even the disciples at that point said, who is this guy? Even the seas obey him, right? And so when we read about these saints, they're not just miracle stories like, oh, isn't that cool? Look at what he did. Wow. No, it's much more than that. It's theology, right? It's showing you that this person has reached such a pure heart that he's like Adam before the fall. He's the way man was intended to be, perfect, right? And that he had reached this point where nature obeyed him. And animals that are usually vicious towards humans are not vicious towards this person. And that they don't attack him, and he's not scared of them, right? Again, what's going on here? It's more than that, right? Okay, I'll stop there. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, anecdotes, jokes, anything? All right. Yes, go ahead. You had a question? No, you're just scratching your... Yes.
Oh, I have a question.
Good.
So I think, like, some people are starting to try to combine, like, the theory of evolution, not just, like, microevolution, with Christianity. Like, the story of creation, like, matches up the progression of evolution, too. So some people are saying, like, oh, maybe, like, God used evolution as a tool in his creation, and then when we got the story, he just used it, they put it into terms that we could understand. Is that, like, contrary to, like, what we believe as Coptics, or is there, like, something?
That's a good question. So the question is, what's our relationship with evolution? Unfortunately, there are some people who want to attack evolution because they think that evolution is inconsistent with creation. And that is not the Orthodox perspective, right? There's nothing wrong with evolution, right? It's very scientifically backed, right? Are there parts of it that people don't understand? Absolutely. Are there gaps? Absolutely. Does that make it false? No, right? Does that mean because we have survival of the fittest and natural selection, and the bird with the beak that, knows how to eat these kind of bugs survived, and the bird with the bad beak died? Does that mean there's no God? No, of course not, right? So I think the problem with evolution is some people took evolution as limited as it was and said, aha, you see, there's no God, which actually is a stretch of logic and that's bad science, if you will. Right? And so I think, then some Christians reacted and said, no, we have to attack evolution, which I don't think is correct to do. We don't have to attack evolution. And then some other Christians, I think, went along and said, well, let's see how we can morph the two together, right? So let me find archaeological evidence of the flood, right? I'm not a big fan of that either, right? I don't think there's any need to do that. How old is the world? I really don't know. And does the Bible tell me? The Bible is a book of theology. It's not a book of history. It's not a book of science. The story of Adam is a story of theology, right? It's not necessarily a literal story of exactly how things happen. Was it a serpent on its belly? Was it an apple? I don't know, right? But I know that when man sinned, he felt shame. That's theology. And I know that the evil one manipulated them into sinning. That's theology. And I know that when he sinned, he was separated from God. That's theology, right? So that's what I take away from the story of Adam. Do I try to figure out, was that Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates? And I think the Garden of Eden was located here because there's a plant that's described. Come on. I can blow holes in that till I'm blue in the face, right? That's just a joke, right? So I don't think there's any need to do that, right? And certainly the evolution does not need to be contradicted by the church at all. Yeah.
Doesn't it directly contradict the creation? Because it said God made man, but evolution states that we come from monkeys.
Well, I don't think evolution is that simple, right? I think in the story of the Garden of Eden, it says God created man. Right? Now, exactly what form he was and when that was, I don't know. But was he a rational being with a soul? Yes. Right? Did he look exactly like me? I don't know. Right? Was he a monkey? No. Right? So that's what I can tell you. Okay. Do I have to fight that battle? No. Right? Do I have to go out of my way to try to prove it wrong and say, no. Right? So there are many aspects of evolution that I think the eminent, the doctors and PhDs will tell you there are big holes in evolution, right? Your ninth grade bio teacher knows evolution to be true, right? but the world famous scholar doesn't, right? So there's lots of holes, and there's lots of places where there's gaps, and that scientists had to fill in those gaps, right? Does that make it not real? No. Right? Are there aspects of it? Yeah. Does that mean there's no God? No, not at all. Can this be the mechanism with which God creates and continues to create? Sure. I mean, forest fires are a way that are creating the world as we speak. There's tectonic plates that move right now that are creating mountains, and and Hawaii's got open lava. I mean, that's the way the world works, right? So that doesn't mean there's no God. And I don't have to be threatened by that. Is that good?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other good questions like that one? Nothing? All right. Oh, yeah, another one.
I'll keep going. Just one.
I'm here all day.
Can science actually strengthen our faith? Like you said, there's holes in science that a lot of scientists can't explain. Can that point us to a creator, or do those two things kind of have to? Does faith have to oppose science, or can they?
No, I don't think faith has to oppose science. And I mean, those holes can point to a creator for sure, and there's gaps that really point to a creator. And when you get into it, I know, Abuna Gregory gets into this stuff, and those gaps really point to a creator. But what was the first part of the question? Sorry.
Can science strengthen our faith?
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, I think I can't imagine, being a doctor, going to medical school, understanding how the body works, and not just being blown away by it, right? And just coming across that and not just wondering in awe at God, at what created this, who or what created this. I mean, when I come across a fancy Lego, in the mall, right? Someone builds a big old, T-Rex Lego that's 6 feet tall. I think to myself, wow, who did this? This is amazing. I'd love to meet the guy who built this Lego T-Rex, right? It's pretty cool, okay? So I can imagine as I study the biology of the human body, and that I wouldn't be, 1,000 times more impressed than that. So the problem is as humans, we like to, when we understand something, we seem to think that it's ours. It's almost like, once you learn something, you're like, oh, well, I understand how this works. So, I'm the man now. And you're kind of like, someone just showed you how it works. You didn't make it. You can't make it. We can't make anything, right? We can't make a muscle. We can't make a tendon. We can't make a nerve. We can't restore. There's so much, right? We can't even make honey. Only bees can make honey, right? So there's no human technology that knows how to make honey, right? So there's so many things. So we can understand whatever, right? And we can learn, and we can say, oh, well, actually, these patterns come from this and this. But we can't do anything, right? And so, yeah, I would think studying these things would just be awe-inspiring, right? But of course, they can be used as a source of pride and hubris and arrogance and, I'm actually, I understand this, you simple Christians don't understand anything. I actually understand how biology works, and that's why I know that you don't know why cancer started, right? There's a lot of things you don't know, right? And, good. Any other questions? You guys let him take all the questions? Clara?
So we actually can artificially make honey?
No, you can't.
Yeah, you can.
Loser.
Yeah,
It's crappy honey.
A team of Israeli students just created honey without bees.
A bunch of Israeli students, really? Where's this from? Is this like, this Fox News?
Says they made honey.
It's not MSNBC, is it?
No.
Okay. I would like the source, and I would like to taste the honey. Actually, I don't want to taste the honey. It'll kill me. And why Israeli students? Why not Israeli researchers? Huh. So how old are these students? 4th grade? 5th grade?
Analyze it. Come on.
So let me get this right. I said people can't make honey. You Googled it to see if people can make honey. You found
We were like 100%, like big.
100%. And the best you could find is a bunch of Israeli students, grade unknown, maybe 5th, maybe 8th grade, we don't know, made honey.
Well, you know what?
What?
The child can make honey and it's still honey.
I'll let you eat that honey. I'm not touching it.
Karen likes it.
That's not the point.
It's not real.
It's not real honey.
There's videos on YouTube.
But it's not on Sue's raw, unfiltered.
All right. You made a good point there.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
It says that the only difference is the enzymes or whatever.
That's the most important part.
Other than it not being like honey, it's exactly like honey, I think is what the summary is. They can make goo. I mean, I can buy
You
goo.
know what? It's sticky
It's sticky, sweet.
and it's sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of like those energy gels that people eat, the athletes have. It's kind of like honey. And they have honey flavored ones. So there it is.
Yeah, so they can artificially make honey flavoring.
Then in that case,
Same thing.
right. Thank you. Any other good questions? All right. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Thank you guys for coming.